So after that huge lore dump, let's see what's hanging out at the bottom of Sen's fortress. And as we discussed quickly before, this fortress has the visual appearance of a slaughterhouse with grates in the floor, just like you would find in a real abattoir. The grates allow the blood of the butchered cattle to drain away from the floor and into some kind of sluice or reservoir below. And at the bottom of this pit we find the blood of the Knights of Lordran that made it to this fortress, and it is made of pure dark, just like we found in the mess hall in the Undead Parish, which in that episode we compared to the blood we found in the basement. In the basement it is red, as the dark is diluted amongst the many soldiers of the armies in that era, but here, just like in the parish, the dark has been concentrated into a single knight. Now notice we are moving slowly, sticking to the floor as we try to battle this Titanite demon, as if this area has been coated with tar. This is the beginning of the idea of the dark being associated with tar, a flammable substance that can be used to create a torch to light one's way and explore hidden depths. In Dark Souls 2 in No Man's Wharf we find pots of flammable tar that are used by the creatures there as a weapon. The flammable nature of the dark is not as explicitly stated in Dark Souls 1, but it is heavily implied, and this is where we start to see the idea that the dark is being used to fuel the flame. And speaking of Dark Souls 2, notice the cages here are similar to the cage lanterns found in No Man's Wharf, where something is being burned to light the ship. Also, this area feels like the Earthen Peak. The giant cogs in the area are just like the ones we found above the contraption in this fortress, knocking the boulder along its path. We've discussed the Earthen Peak being a symbol of Stora. Now we can expand on that to begin to see it represents the whole era, when the Knights of Lordran were sent from below to the trials above. And hidden along a side path in the Earthen Peak, you will find a statue of the owner of this fortress. At the bottom of this pit we find the scythe, a halberd, a symbol of Priscilla. We found the great scythe in the catacombs where it represented Priscilla as wife of Nito. At that time she and Velka harvested the dark from the fallen warriors of the Endless War, and here it represents the next chapter of her story. The scythe, halberd with a large blade, scythe adjusted for battle, designed especially for slicing. However, one false swing leaves one wide open. And here, wrapped in the tail of the Titanite demon, the soul of the brave warrior, a hint towards Manus's identity as the blacksmith deity, but also everyone who fell into this pit. Returning to the scythe, this item description speaks to the dangerous game Gwyn and Priscilla are playing with the Stora and their hastily cobbled together fix, New Londo, trying to corral the dark and constrain it in one place. Everything is fine if the pendulum axes do their job and keep the dark-ridden knights at bay, but with one false swing a single beast can escape. One knight not staying where he is meant to stay can bring the whole kingdom to its knees. Notice the gold soul drop. As we discussed earlier, symbolizes the soul of a knight. This Titanite demon is a knight. And also a reminder, the prophecy written in Elder Futhark runes, the Dark Son inherits the joy of family. Now there is not just one Titanite demon down here in the pit with me, there are 4. And this is something that needs Dark Souls 2 to completely explain, I believe. I'm a bit hesitant to talk to the more obscure parts of Dark Souls 2, as I said in that installment, as I'm still early on in the reading of that game. And by the way, a quick correction, you still have to ring the adorable Bell of Awakening in No Man's Wharf to call the ship into dock, and that speaks to my knowledge of the game. But, you know why not? I've already declared that a Witch of Isil's name is unknowable, something that is terrible logically. So let's put something else crazy out there. I believe the 4 Titanite demons here represent the 4 great ones in Dark Souls 2, and this goes to something I am nervous about but hinted at in the Depths episode with the Ring of the Evil Eye. Does that ring represent the creation of the Abyss? It's something I want to be true for no other reason than poetry. Everything was stolen from Velka, her city, her love, her cult, even the title Mother of the Abyss. but I can't find the evidence I want in Dark Souls 1, even though I want it to be here. There's plenty of tertiary things that point at it, but nothing I feel that is concrete. And I'm afraid the things that I have seen I see because I want it to be true. Sentiment is a powerful force. But the thing about the Great Ones in Dark Souls 2 is they represent all three characters that I will claim by the end of the tour became one with the Abyss. And those three characters are grouped together with the Lost Sinner, a collection of symbols associated with Velka. But I should stop there as I'm getting into spoiler territory, and we can come back and discuss all of this later on. Returning to Dark Souls 1, you will have noticed the effortless way that I move towards the Titanite demon that continues to butcher me over and over. And that is because I am wearing the rusted iron ring which is faintly stained with blood, a ring we found in the Undead Asylum on the western side, and it symbolises the imprisonment of Hawkeye Gough, one of the generals of Gwyn and the ruler of the western region, where we now have the Darkroot Garden. This happened at the beginning of the era of New Londo, where Gwyn had Hawkeye locked away before he combined the east and the west into one domain and gave it to Havel the Rock to oversee. Havel the Rock now ruled the north as he always did, the east, which was once Manus' domain before it was given to Velka, and now the west. Seek the Scalers holds on to the south. Now this ring helps us move through water as discussed in the Undead Asylum, a symbol of trapping of the sinful undead drowned in a well of Priscilla's tears. Also, it helps us in the swamp of Blighttown, the remains of the dark that washed out of the depths. The swamp is a symbol of the consequences of greed, the remains of Velka's sins. And here it helps us move through the darkness at the base of Sen's fortress, another symbol of the consequences of gluttony, the remains of the Knights of Lordran. And this speaks to the terrible crime committed by Hawkeye Gough. Hawkeye Gough proved himself in the war with the dragons by leading the great archers, and when the war was done, the three lords gave him the west, and as ruler he helped to coordinate the endless war as one of the great generals under Sen in the First Age of Fire. Then came Astora, and this seems to be where Hawkeye Gough turns on Gwyn as he betrays the other lords. Hawkeye is a great military strategist, and he knows a bad plan when he sees one, and boy is Gwyn's plan bad. And so he chose a different way to Gwyn. He decided in the era of Astora to undermine the new regime, to help the smaller humanoids find their way through the darkness and manage the curse of humanity that they were born with, in the hopes that they did not fall prey to the lies of Astora. At first this seems to be a kind and gentle act of one of the few good people in Lordran, and it is in a way, but it is also an action taken out of fear. Hawkeye Gough knew what was going to happen and the cost of another great war, but it's also an act of absolution, seeking forgiveness for one's sins. As it says in the item description of that ring, it shackles the guilty. Hawkeye Gough grew to become very remorseful of his actions in Lordran. And at first Gwyn is either unaware or does not care about Hawkeye Gough's teachings, arrogant in the foolproof nature of his plan. But when everything starts to fall apart in Astora, Gwyn looks down from Enolondo and he sees what Hawkeye is doing, and it's something he can no longer allow to continue. Gwyn's scheme ironically needed the humans to follow their base desires that came from the caduceus that grew within them. And so, as part of the new Londo fix, he grabbed Hawkeye Gough, labelled him a heretic, and locked him away in a tower to await the end of the world. So while I get my Dark Souls legs back after the break, let's talk about another difference between this remastered edition and the classic Prepare to Die edition. You may have spotted the other changes, but this one is very subtle, and that is the particle system of the lightning that is fired by the Titanite demon. In the Prepare to Die edition, the particle system has the primary layer of lightning, but there is a secondary effect of small green particles that are chasing the lightning. This secondary layer is missing in the remastered edition. All the particle systems are redone. The addition of the evil eye ring to the gargoyle scream is a change to that particle system, as is the change to the eyes of the barbarians in Blighttown. The effect is small, but just like everything in games, there's nothing small on the back end. The layer of green particles would have been visible in the Unreal Engine tools. The team that recreated this effect decided to edit it out. What does the green chaser mean? I believe this is the colours of Manus. Manus being the main character of Dark Souls 1, the one going on the actual hero's journey that frames the history of the game, has a strange colour set. It goes from green as the servant of the gods, to golden green as the blacksmith deity, and then black and gold as the father of the abyss. The one problem with that is Dark Souls 2. Jester Thomas's armor set is black and gold only. Gold and green has been abandoned. This happens elsewhere in Dark Souls 2 with symbols associated with Manus. The green and gold appear in a few places. This particle system, the lanterns that appear above Havel's warrior, and in the Undead Asylum. It is a general colour scheme of the old church in the woods, and most importantly, the Dusk Crown Ring, which we will get to later. These connect Manus to the blacksmith deity, Havel's story, and Dusk of Ulasil. It seems the creators wanted to edit and simplify Manus' symbols, and when it came to the remaster they decided to remove the particle effect. This change may be good, may be bad. I don't know how many people would have seen this effect to start with, so there may not have been much lost or gained by doing this. For me, it was a fun surprise, a reinforcement of other elements I had unpacked a different way. Continuing with the tour, now that we've fallen into the depths, we have access to this illusory wall, in front of which sat the proud soul of a knight. In the top of this ladder, we see an area we've already seen. This is where the giant pulled the chain that raised the gate of Sen's fortress after we rung the Bell of Awakening in Blighttown. Notice the attack of the giant. This is the only real place you see the flailing of the creature as it tries to defend itself. The flailing is followed up by a collapse. The giant is exhausted, left wide open so that we can deliver the killing blow before it is able to recover. Once again, notice the gold soul indicating a knight, just like the soul we acquired in front of the door. And here we are halfway up Sen's fortress. We see the Bell of Awakening as well as the path from the old church in the woods. Also the missing bell from the knocked over bell tower. That was moved to Quelaag's domain to redirect the pilgrimage after the fall of Ulasil, because by that time the dark was no longer needed up here in Fireling's shrine. Instead, it needed to be incinerated below. Now notice the staircase above us. There is a lookout up there that we will be exploring soon. Now notice the chains. There is a large chain with a small chain wrapped around it. I believe this is a symbol of the giants and their metamorphosis from the smaller humanoids to the goats. There is a very unique and important aspect of this configuration that we didn't see because I am such an amazingly skilled Dark Souls player. If my weapon should fail me and I died to that giant, I will be reborn, and upon returning to that illusory wall, we will find it has returned. No other illusory wall has this property. Once it is cleared, it stays that way for the playthrough, and this difference is intentional. What we are seeing is the hiding of machinery of a still operating grift. The other illusory walls are blocking elements that were hidden long ago, before the creator of the illusion had moved on in one way or another. The giant opening the way to Sen's fortress is not meant to be found by the chosen undead. Instead, they should grab their reward of the soul of the proud knight and get back to their main quest to succeed Gwyn. And while I may be an amazing Dark Souls player, I am a terrible tour guide, as I have let Sigmar rush ahead to Enolondo before we have had a chance to chat to him. This does not bode well for the later parts of this tour, something I am very much dreading. This is Season 2, so I'm going to say I'm allowed to fix things in post, especially because this contains one of my favourite lines in the game. So just to give some context, we would have found Sigmar down here below the path of the boulder, where there are also two serpent men. In another time and space we find Sigmar sitting above a dark chasm contemplating his predicament as the sun destroys the world around him. Two serpent men are found dead while Sigmar is here, but once he is gone they will find the desire to live, and when they do, they will run up the ramp into the path of the boulder and end up crushed like everything else.
Oh ho! Ah, where did you come from? Splendid news, I tell you.
Sigmar is a symbol of Havel the Rock, and he is always happy to see us, because we are doing the task that was meant to be his. succeed Gwyn, push back the dark, and keep everything in its place.
Ah, so you see my plight. Yes, indeed. I've run up against a wall, or a ball, to be precise. I must say, I'm a bit too tough to be outrunning those things. So here I sit in quite a pickle, but who knows? Perhaps we'll have another development.
The pickle is an obscure reference to Priscilla's blue tears.
Perhaps I could try some room. Ah, no chance. My head is big.
Classic Havel with his hilarious dad jokes. They kill every time. But now something that is no laughing matter. The sword behind Sigmaya. The Shotel, a symbol of a wicked betrayal that no one saw coming. The Shotel, a curved sword with a sharply curved blade, created by Astor, Earl of Karim, requires great skill to wield, but evades shield defense to sneak in damage. This sword belongs to the same family of swords as the falchion and the scimitar, and it is associated with Karim, the home of Oswald of Karim, which inherited the domain of Priscilla and Velka. This is a symbolic warning to Sigmaya. And now we're heading up to a room we went through quickly before, and will do so again for time. But if you stop to notice the Silver Knight statues, you will see something rather interesting about their placement. In one corner we have 5 statues grouped together, Gwyn standing in front of his 4 kings of New Londo. In another corner by the elevator stained with blood, with spikes at the top ready to bleed any who attempt to ascend higher than they should, Priscilla, who stands with the other 5 but apart. And using the visual design of the statues, we can see the 3 at the door as we entered are the 3 that stole the flame: Gwyn, Priscilla and Velka. This is a room of the self-appointed protectors of the realms of Lordran, and they corralled the smaller humanoids in the multiple eras of Lordran. And, as we know, it was for their own good, of course. And while these adults sit, plot and undermine one another in that room, a soul child sits alone and forgotten in the next, perplexed and angry, smashing up the remains of an empty home. And as we leave this dysfunctional home, we follow the path of the sun on pilgrimage. And at the end we find a bottomless pit and an impenetrable wall. At least at first. And then after all hope seems lost, we find an elevator that will lift us up again. Standing next to it, someone at the front of a group of toppled knights, as though wanting us to join them. Hawkeye Gough, the guilt-ridden. He wants us to find the peace within our soul, and he wants that for his own good, of course. We reject Hawkeye's offer and end up back where we started, in the room with the boulder. The room at the top of Sen's fortress has 4 paths to navigate, each representing the 4 flames of Lordran and their story. The Divine Flame, the Children's Flame, and 2 unnamed flames, which I call Jerry's Flame and the Eternal Flame. Grinding away now, as they have since the dawn of time, are the cogs of the machine at the center of it all, the Daughters of Chaos. And all this comes together to remind us of something important that we've not really covered on the tour so far, as the idea wasn't needed. The idea of going hollow, existence without purpose or hope. First there was the endless war of the Daughters of Chaos fought by 4 armies of mortal creatures. Those not as great as Manus, Sen, Havel or the Knights of Gwyn were cut down in battle, their quest a failure but complete, and their blood was harvested for the first flame, as necessary to the cycle as any other warrior that they fought alongside. But in the era of Astora, the people of Lordran are cursed with the gift of immortality and the gift of caste. There are those in Lordran who were forced through a feeling of obligation to family and city to throw themselves at the challenges of pilgrimage even when they were no knight. Over and over again they struggled, even though there was no hope of victory. Eventually their minds broke as they chased the sun, and the poor tortured souls went hollow. And this created yet another problem in Lordran, insane hollow knights chaotically butchering the other cattle. At this point the undead asylum had not been built by the valiant father Manus, so the covenants that existed before this era became vital in patching the small cracks that were appearing in Gwyn's plan, specifically the covenant of the Dark Moon Goddess Priscilla, Queen of Lordran. The kindly mother who sent her noble knights to protect the weak and innocent of the kingdom from the monsters that had been created by the Queen of Lordran, Priscilla, the Dark Moon Goddess. This fortress was the proving ground of that cast, and so the remains of the Hollow Knights, such as these Knights of Baldor, are still here today. And they protect the flame stone plate ring. Stone plates, the symbol of a true knight, grant the strength to face various hardships. The red stone plates symbolize fire and boost defense against flame. Notice that the ring talks of various hardships, but nothing specific. In our mind, we see the Knights of Lordran striking down vicious dragons as the ring protects them from their fiery breath. This is a common cliche in culture, but only one of the dragons we encounter in our time in Lordran breathes fire. The rest attack with all manner of elements. The ring is not used to fight dragons, even though it can be if the wearer wishes. We learn from the Baldor armor set the kingdom of Baldor fell after a spawning of undead, and this ring was what those knights needed to defend their doomed kingdom. Ahead we find another Hollow Knight plated in steel, the Baronite Knight who watches over the undead church, where their compatriot guards the altar of Ulasil. And as we discussed then, notice the shield with 4 wings lifting up the humanity in worship of the 4-winged mother, Priscilla, who lifted them up in the era of Ulasil. Though sadly for these knights who decorated themselves so elegantly for their goddess before ringing the bell of awakening and struggled through this fortress, when they reached Enolondo's city of gods, they found that fashion had moved on. Pilgrimage was so 100 years ago. And after the last order of knights in Lordran, we have the first that were pulled from the ranks of men, the Knights of Astora. And while the other knights sit around in positions where they are easily flanked and their weapons are cumbersome, this knight has positioned himself perfectly for the weapons he wields to meet anyone who approaches unprepared. And this strategic thinking was similar to the other Knight of Astora we found in the Undead Asylum. He also fought with skill and cunning. Both were trained under the great military leader Menace, the Dragon King in the Age of Brass. Recall when we first started the game. A Knight of Astora came to our cell and dropped the key that allowed us to escape. At first I claimed it was the knight in the cell above, behind a stone wall, having dropped himself through a hole in the roof. And it seemed odd, but possible with the small amount of information we had at the time. I was being a bit of an imperfect narrator, you see. Something I have pretty much abandoned because it was a dumb idea. Anyway, we then talked to the crestfallen warrior, and he mentioned he saw someone leave Filing Shrine in the clutches of the crow before we arrived, a handy hint to let us know we could return to the Undead Asylum. Though more than that, it gave us extra detail. At that point we could start to piece things together a little bit more logically. There are 2 Knights of Astora in the Undead Asylum, one already locked away in a cell and another free to give us the key. And with that knowledge, all we had to do was track down the second, and perhaps we would be able to figure out why he would help us to escape to start with. We have now found the actual knight who originally freed us from that cell. And this Knight of Astora attacks us if we get too close, with no dialogue to let us know what is happening. This is because he believes he knows what he is dealing with, just like the soldier that dropped the gate in the undead parish when we were seen approaching. This knight knows there is no reasoning with this. There is no explanation he could give that would be satisfying to us. So he hides off the path of the main pilgrimage, hoping to go unnoticed. And if he is noticed, he stands his ground. He tries to deter us by being a defensive and an annoying enemy to fight. He protects only single-use items, things that would be worthless to an undead with an Estus flask. They are simply curiosities from long ago. He believes if he fights us back long enough, we will get bored with him and get back to the task at hand, the pilgrimage of the chosen undead. Though this knight is fighting a losing battle because he doesn't know what he's actually dealing with, a Nameless Tour guide. And this knight foolishly placed behind him some of the most important items telling the history of Lordran. And I am here for game lore. I will not rest till every inch of Lordran is explored and explained. No matter how many times he kills me, I will return to butcher the loyal Prince Rickard, who served Queen Velka, the mother he loved, to the very end. That's right, this is no knight. This is a prince, the child of Velka and Menace. You see, I was being an imperfect narrator. As you see, Prince Rickard stood atop this lookout, where he commanded the giant below to lift the gate to Sen's fortress when the bells of awakening had been rung. Rickard's rapier, A rapier with intricate decorations, chosen weapon of the infamous undead Prince Rickard. Rickard's exploits are told in a monomyth. He was born into royalty but wandered the lands in a fateful ill-conceived journey. He became undead and disappeared up north. A couple of things to note. This rapier has an intricate design, the sign of a great craftsman, a gift from Manus to his son. The hilt is made of the brass of a storer. Rickard is an infamous undead who wandered the land before disappearing up north. This is the story of Velka that we've discussed so far, and her being locked away in the asylum. But this is also the story of Manus, who also vanished up north. In the era of New Londo, Gwyn's sacrifice was not enough to keep the flame lit. In fact, the sacrifice caused it to become unstable. And so the people of Lordran needed to find an alternative. A person who could help with that kind of mystical knowledge was Velka, slumbering up north, and so Manus set off to wake his queen. In the room behind undead Prince Rickard, we find the Divine Blessing, a symbol of the current regent of Lordran, Princess Guinevere, who will become part of the story next episode. This shows Priscilla blessing the journey in the Age of Iron to wake her daughter. Next to it we find the end of the journey, what Manus brought back, the rare Ring of Sacrifice. The rare Ring of Sacrifice. This mystical ring was created in a sacrificial rite of Velka, the goddess of sin. The magenta shaded ring is especially rare. Its wearer will lose nothing upon death, and will be freed from any curse whatsoever, but the ring itself breaks. Manus broke into Velka's cell just as Rickard broke into ours, and in that instant Velka was awake. The sun had returned her to the day, and Manus asked his love to help save Lordran from the dark, and Velka accepted because her passion for Manus had never died. Fortunately, she knew how to make a new flame. She had found that ancient knowledge in her books. And we already know what is needed to create any good flame. The first thing you need is a few bad apples. Rickard, the Prince of Astora, symbol of Manus, didn't get to the asylum alone. He was flown there by a crow, a symbol of the Witch of Izalith. Just as Manus had gone north with the witch, who desperately hoped for a new flame to tend, she was there when Velka awoke. And after slipping out from under Havel the Rock, the three bad apples made their escape to Lordran, where they prepared for a new era, different from the one of the cattle grazing on helpless grain, a time of peace, a time of doves and boars. And as she was pulled up through the roof of her cell, Velka tossed aside her childish doll, because now she understood the world. This was her time. She would rule Lordran, and Manus would never be able to leave her again.